Training resumed as planned that night, with little in the way of complications. Rather than complications, their schedule had been accelerated. The steady stream of goblins carrying supplies, unaware that the main body of the goblin army had been destroyed the previous night, provided the new arrivals with full contingents of squire zombies before the evening had fallen. As reported, the target camps for the night were mostly what one might consider training camps, filled with weak and poorly equipped demi-humans that were often set upon while they were performing their drills. As a result, they provided even less resistance than previous nights, and Ludmilla had to outline theoreticals in absence of a more genuine experience as the Elder Lich commanders practiced with their troops. Once it appeared that they were well on their way, her mind turned to Shizu's words and she pulled out the rune bow Ultua. How would she draw the attention of others to the bow? How would she use it, for that matter? It was nearly as tall as a longbow, ill-suited for firing from the back of a mount, or the shoulders of an Elder Lich, in her case. I do not recall identifying a magical bow from any of the forays against this goblin army, Nonna said. This is from Miss Shizu, Ludmilla replied. The rune bow Ultua. From Lady Shizu, rune bow, I see. Lady Shizu? As expected, the servants of the Sorcerer King were from some extraordinary backgrounds. Considering her detachable leg and nearly expressionless features, was she some sort of construct? A golem princess? Lady Shiltir had mentioned something about turning into a golem, once. Entema likely held some lofty status as well. Do you know anything about rune bows? Ludmilla asked. Lady Shizu said something about it being crafted using the ancient art of runecraft. She also mentioned that it was an exclusive product of the Sorceress Kingdom. I am uncertain of its details, but it is most surely a wondrous thing. How could she speak so confidently about it when she was uncertain of its details? It was a sort of inconsistent statement that she rarely, if ever, heard from the Elder Lich. A number of arrows rose into the air as one of the Elder Lich commanders skimmed a bit too close over its assigned camp. She retrieved a broadhead arrow and raised the rune bow Ultua. What are you doing? Trying to see if I can use this up here. Scanning the camp for a likely target, Ludmilla located what looked like a healer who was desperately scrambling back and forth. She drew her bow, then something came loose between her legs. Startled, she released the arrow and it grazed her target's arm. Looking down, she saw that Nonna had released her grip on her thighs and her hands were now placed on top of her head. Did your head just? It didn't happen. Ludmilla frowned down worriedly at the back of Nonna's cowl. I was trying to stabilize my form and it didn't happen. Of course. There were already enough strange rumors circulating about her. Squeezing an Elder Lich's head off with her thighs was not something she wanted to add to them. She settled on releasing her arrows at half-draw, though even those attacks appeared to be stupendously powerful. The healer that she had missed was picked off first, followed by anything else that looked like some kind of magic caster. After 24 targets, she felt like she was depriving the trainees of their training, so she stopped. Killing such weak demi-humans didn't seem like a very efficient use of arrows, anyways. She had Nonna assent so she could look over at the remaining encampments. Have there been any reports of these training camps starting to break up yet? She asked. We've received no updates of the sort, Nonna replied. If anything, these camps are larger than the average encampment. Ludmilla mused over the idea of just scattering the remaining encampments. Since they were demi-humans engaged in training, it would stand to reason that they were the native population of the basin. Once they were dispersed, they would be trivial to deal with using her regular security forces. She eyed the ancient pass looming far to the west. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea. If some overwhelming evil did appear, the chaos might be more than she could manage. When the night's training ended, Ludmilla returned to her manor, eager to find out what the bone vultures had discovered in the west. The distance from the southern edge of the basin was so great that it took them until mid-morning to reach the harbor. Thinking about Lady Shiltir's push to have her claim the upper reaches for the Sorceress Kingdom, she wondered how Clara managed her huge domain. She probably didn't ride one of her Elder Liches everywhere, and there were far more people living in Corlin County. Willuvian, has there been anything from the bone vultures we sent out? Only a few have returned, my lady, she replied. We don't have a proper map of the region, so there are only rough reports to go by. The base camps we identified when all of this started are still there. Across the river, there's some sort of plain, That's all we really have. Nothing noteworthy has been reported there. It was good news, probably. If nothing went on, she could conduct the last training exercise and then settle down to see how the camps on the west side reacted to the destruction of the Goblin army. There have been some movements reported inside the basin, however, Willuvian added. Where? Ludmilla tensed. The reports are intermittent, my lady. It may be that the tribes in the upper reaches are returning to their regular lives. Is it everywhere at once? Or are they coming from somewhere? There are groups of demi-humans returning from where they were driven to in the east. Willuvian looked down at the map, and there might be another group in the southwest. Perhaps the remaining camps are breaking up now. The east should be safe to leave alone for now, Ludmilla said. I doubt they will try anything after seeing that the Goblin army has been wiped out. I will head out and see what I can learn about the movements to the southwest once I complete my report. Please let the next batch of trainees know where to go once they arrive. She headed out with Nonna in the mid-afternoon, flying over the passes to see if anything had disturbed the zombies collecting there. After inspecting the westernmost pass, they turned south to investigate the approaches. When they had passed over several sets of camps, she spotted movement in the one ahead. Whatever it was must have seen them too, for it dashed away into the trees as they approached. Judging by its size relative to the camp features, it was larger than a hobgoblin. Ludmilla looked around for a bone vulture and sent it over to where the figure had disappeared. It circled overhead several times, finding nothing. Did you see that? Nonna shook her head. Summon some wraiths. See if you can flush whatever it is out of the trees down there. The elder lich did as instructed, but failed to find anything. Further down, there was more movement. Another one. Or maybe the same one. In the camp to the west of us. Nonna turned to follow. This time, the mysterious figure did not seem to take notice of either Nonna or the bone vulture circling overhead. It finished rooting around the camp before they came close enough to identify it, loping out towards the nearby brush. Ludmilla leaned forward as they closed in, trying to figure out what it was. It passed behind a tree. When it appeared on the other side, it was facing them directly. Her sense of alarm rose sharply when she realized what it was. Null. Protection from arrows. Get us out of here. The hyena beastman raised its massive greatbow. Ludmilla grabbed the round shield from her infinite haversack and held it before her. Protection from arrows. Forta. Ludmilla was jolted off of Nonna's shoulders. Pain filled the world and her body seized. In her shock, she dully registered the arrow that had exploded out of her chest. Its shaft was wider than her thumb, and it was tipped by a barbed black head as long as her hand. She didn't feel herself hit the ground. Amidst the murky nothingness, she floated. Irritation filled her being. Dissatisfaction. Something important left undone. Too many somethings. The nothingness lapped around her like soothing waves but was of little comfort. Somewhere beyond herself, she felt herself, drifting away like she herself was. What she felt from them only served to exacerbate her bitterness. Ignorance. Failure. Incompetence. Impressions of other selves, punctuating her powerlessness. She didn't like this place. No, it was more truthful to say that she hated it. There was nothing for her here. There was nothing to be done here. She sought purpose, duty, a way to fix things, a way out. But there was none. Only the nothingness and the beyond. An eternity later, something dark approached. Evil, a part of herself screamed. Unclean, the echoes in the nothingness came. But the darkness was familiar to her. It was comfort in a place where there was none. A chance to make things right. She reached out across the void, felt the comforting darkness entwine around her being. She opened her eyes. There was the ceiling of her manor, the sense of her home. Her blankets slid over her bare skin as her chest rose with a weak breath. "Leave us," a familiar voice said. "Now." She turned her head. Lady Sheltier was seated on the edge of her parents' bed. An exquisite ivory rod lay across her lap. Her crimson eyes glowed, fixing Ludmilla's gaze with her own. "Lady Sheltier," she said. "What?" Memory came. A sudden jolt and a world of pain. The sense of falling, her body burning from the inside. At the end, nothing. "Did my words mean nothing to you?" Lady Sheltier asked quietly. Did you not understand them, perhaps?" Her liege's voice smoldered, and Ludmilla fell silent. She could absorb the fury of others, shrug off their hate and their scorn. But not this. This was disappointment. Disappointment in her failure. Ludmilla's very soul seemed to want to curl up and disappear somewhere. Tears of frustration welled up in her eyes. "Oh, it seems that you do," Lady Sheltier said. "At least in part. Do you require me to enlighten you of my full meaning?" "No, my lady," Ludmilla replied. At least I think I understand." "Are you sure?" Lady Sheltier raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it from you, just in case." Lady Sheltier rose from her seat, walking up to the side of Ludmilla's bed. Her hand stretched out, and Ludmilla tensed. She felt the points of Lady Sheltier's nails playing lightly over her blanket. "If I don't like your answer," she said lightly, "you won't be getting up again." Ludmilla remained silent for several moments, feeling the touch of her liege roam over her abdomen. "You have taken me as your vassal," Ludmilla said quietly. "Invested me with duty, shared with me your responsibilities. I am an agent of His Majesty's will. To fail is to show that His Majesty's will may be resisted, denied." "That's right," Lady Sheltier said. "Lord Irons's will is absolute. All who challenge his authority must be made to see this truth. Yet you have done just the opposite." Ludmilla sat up in her bed, drawing her blanket up to her collarbone. "I will return to the field and seek restitution, my lady. I will reclaim the honor lost." Lady Sheltier sniffed dismissively. "You say that, but are you capable of delivering on your claim? You were slain by a single arrow from an opponent you did not even realize was there. Your equipment is gone and you've lost levels. Your words ring hollow, in my estimation." Ludmilla cast her gaze downwards, looking around for her things. There was nothing there. She would still be able to command from the air, but at a safe height, she had no real hope to locate those gnolls. None of her forces could detect them. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to catch the strong ones and would eventually lose them again. "It is as you say, my lady," Ludmilla said. "I possess the resolve, but it is all that I have. I can't do it on my own. I need help." Two objects landed at the foot of her bed. Ludmilla's eyes widened. They were infinite haversacks identical to her own. "It would be better if you were to permanently cast away that sort of impulsive response," Lady Sheltier said. "What is required of you is demonstrable results, not empty words." Ludmilla reached out and pulled one of the containers onto her lap. Within was her equipment. "My lady," she looked up in disbelief, "this is—" "The failings of a vassal are the responsibility of their liege," Lady Sheltier told her. "Fortunately, they were foolish enough to take off with your equipment, so Negredo found them right away." You went out there personally?" "I did," Lady Sheltier said. "My escorts herded them back out of the upper reaches. There are a couple of thousand gnolls smeared against the walls of that ancient pass, now. I think a few thousand goblins ended up in the mix, too. I am truly ashamed for troubling you, my lady." Lady Sheltier stepped back, crossing her arms over her midriff. "I may not be very good at many things," Lady Sheltier said, "but I believe that I told you that fighting is something that I excel at. I know well enough what should and shouldn't be possible when it comes to personal combat. I won't arbitrarily punish you for failing at something that you cannot do, but I wanted to hear your response all the same. I have dealt with this matter for now, but I believe you realize that an affront of this nature cannot be allowed to repeat itself." "Yes, yes, my lady," Ludmilla replied. "Thank you for your consideration. I should be pursuing a permanent solution more aggressively, all things considered. It is unforgivable that the defense of the realm is limited by these ongoing shortfalls." "Indeed. For now, however, you have a job to finish." They stared at one another for several moments. Ludmilla shifted uncomfortably under her blanket. "What are you waiting for?" Lady Sheltier told her. "Duty awaits." Ludmilla stepped out of bed and went about dressing herself. Lady Sheltier smiled from the side. "I suppose there are advantages to not having quick-swap enchantments." Ludmilla tried to ignore her liege's leer, which only seemed to amuse her all the more. When she had fully equipped herself, Ludmilla went over to the dinner table to see what had changed on the map. Urgent knocking sounded at the door. She went to answer and found Leluvian waiting outside. "My lady," she said after she stepped in and closed the door again, "something's happened on the other side of the ancient pass." "Go on." "The base camps along the river have been attacked," Leluvian said. "They're burning. There are thousands of demi-humans fleeing into the basin. Did they describe what is attacking them? Not in great detail, Leluvian replied. They suddenly came from over the plain. We're still trying to sort it all out. Ludmilla furrowed her brow, and a chill washed over her body. Whatever it was that the hobgoblin general had mocked her over, the evil star that the Kronos had fled from, had probably come. She turned to Lady Shiltier. My lady, she said. I must return to my command. Lady Shiltier smirked up at her, and a gate opened near Ludmilla's bed. Ludmilla made one last check over her person before stepping towards the portal. Baroness Aradnik. Being so addressed, Ludmilla paused for a moment, then turned. My lady. Einsulgan does not know defeat. Ludmilla straightened, placing a hand over her breast and lowering her head. His Majesty's will shall not be denied. The sounds of laughter filtered through the trees, and QRS steps paused as he marveled at the sound. When had his people learned to laugh and joy again? How many months had they lived with the shadow of Yaldabaoth looming over their shoulders? No, that was wrong. It had been months for QRS, but mere weeks for his people. They had never been subjected to Yaldabaoth's evil tortures, his cruel games that toyed with mind and body alike. The Demon Emperor's appearance was a calamitous event for them, to be sure, but it could have been worse. There was loss and there was grief, but at least those wounds could be soothed by the passage of time. He continued on his way through the trees and out onto the riverbank, where his daughter played with several children of the various races that had come together in their great flight. It was a strange scene. Races that would otherwise be fighting each other over territory and resources were now united by common cause and cooperation. QRS felt that the forest that they had settled in contributed to that feeling as well. It was lush and bountiful, offering them peaceful, idyllic lives. It felt more like home than the home that they had abandoned in the West. Leela, he called out, it's time to go. His daughter stopped, as did the others she was playing with. Sad expressions crossed their faces for a moment, but then she walked away, waving and smiling as she went. The children returned to their play, and QRS took Leela's hand to walk her back to the village. The people had taken well to the place, the initially ramshackle dwellings replaced by more substantial homes. The longer they stayed, the more they accepted the notion that they would be wintering here. QRS suspected that they would be loath to leave when spring arrived. Even the growing demands of the goblin army that was subjugating the basin to the east was not overly strenuous, so plentiful this land was. QRS. The gruff voice of one of the village elders called out, about that thing we talked about. QRS sighed, sending his daughter on her way. He turned around to face the elder who had assailed his moment of reprieve. It'll take too long, he told the elder. It'll be worth it in the long term, the elder pressed him. We're not going to be here for the long term. He thought this, but he didn't want to cast any shadows when everyone had so recently started to show signs of regular life again. Our warriors can keep the ruins suppressed for as long as they need to, QRS said. Besides, it'll keep them sharp. Better to use our mana on other things. What other things are there? The people are healthy, and injuries are minimal. We don't need to summon food or anything else here, either. The elder had a point. Their current situation meant that their mystics had plenty of mana to spare. Then how about figuring out some new spells? QRS suggested that Manticore a couple of weeks ago really showed us how vulnerable we are to flying monsters. The village enchanter could take on some new apprentices too. Those dwarves are insanely miserly when it comes to magic items. It's nowhere as easy as you make it sound, the elder told him. We'll need the right spells, reagents. The elder lich that was lurking in this forest had a huge trove of magic items, didn't it? QRS said, I can't picture anyone actually trading with the undead, so it must have made him from the stuff that can be found around here. Very well, the elder sighed in defeat. We'll look into QRS. They turned their heads at the woman's voice. The huntress was breathing heavily, eyes bloodshot. He didn't want to hear it. He really didn't. There's movement to the west, she panted. Fiends headed our way from across the plain. How far are they? I was just across the river, hunting game when I spotted them, 15 minutes, maybe a bit more. QRS started bellowing orders out across the village. Why had they decided to come now? No, the reason probably made sense. The gnolls had moved across the pass in the last day or so. It left them reliant on their own, limited hunters to stand watch in the rear. It was the best time to come upon them with little warning. His real question was why they were being targeted in particular. The more he thought about it now, the more it didn't make any sense. At first, it just seemed that they were in the way of Yaldabaoth's advance, but his forces had plenty of options now. Shouldn't he strike out against the large, human nations all around the borders of the wilderness? Why did he insist on pursuing their relatively small group? The demonic presence grew on the horizon as QRS urged his people to mobilize. They didn't have enough time, and they were scattered all over the surrounding forest. The 2 other villages would be overrun as the runners sent out to warn them arrived. He frowned as he saw families still running around their newly made homes. Stop trying to pack your things and get over the pass. Those fiends are coming here now. As if to punctuate his point, a massive scale demon landed in the center of the village. QRS brandished his weapon and charged. The first thought that crossed Ludmilla's mind as she and her undead trainees approached the final set of goblin army encampments was how large of a communication network she could create with so many imps. They had already arrived in the basin by the time she came through the gate, swooping down over the demi-human camps in such great numbers that they instead resembled a flock of starlings. So much for training. Or maybe it was time for a change in flavor? I like them better when they are working in an office, Ludmilla muttered. It would be erroneous to correlate our familiars with these transient beings, Nonna told her. The Elder Lich appeared none the worse for wear after their encounter with the gnolls. They had been using piercing arrows against Ludmilla, and Nonna sent her summons down to tie up both the gnoll that had led them into the ambush and the one that had attacked them from behind while she flew up and out of range to contact Lady Shiltier. Transient, you mean someone has summoned thousands of imps? We have no knowledge of any fiend populations native to this region, the Elder Lich replied. It would stand to reason that this would be the case. What about the Black Knight of the 13 Heroes? Ludmilla asked. He was said to be half demon. A tale with no proper historical record, Nonna said. Likely embellished, if this individual even existed at all. The Black Knight was favored by many for his dark and mysterious persona, but Nonna was clearly not a fan. She eyed the cloud of imps in the distance, wondering how they could even begin to get rid of so many. If we get rid of these somehow, whoever sent them can just summon more, yes? This would depend on the method by which they were summoned. If it was simply a matter of having individual summoners casting summoning spells, then yes. Is there a way to locate the summoners? Not unless they give themselves away through poor situational awareness while using their summons. Ludmilla took a tally of her available flying forces. There were 40 bone vultures and 4 elder liches, including Nonna. The bone vultures were a fair bit stronger than the imps, while the elder liches were significantly so. She supposed she could try downing them as well, though using arrows to kill thousands of imps one at a time felt like a futile endeavor. As they came closer, shouts and screams could be heard from the camps. They had been thrown into absolute chaos. Some demi-humans were making a desperate attempt at defense while others were attempting to flee into the surroundings. Many lay scattered over the ground, unmoving. We at least need to get rid of these ones before they get bored of harassing goblins and fly off somewhere, Ludmilla said. They will be an absolute terror if they cross over the borders and start attacking settlements. Do we have a way to get rid of so many at once? They are spread out over a wide area and constantly moving. If they could be drawn into a smaller area effect spells could dispose of most of them. At Nonna's suggestion, she sent several Death Knights forward, ordering them to use their attention-drawing skills when they came within range. The demi-humans in the camp froze, fixing their gazes on the Death Knights, but the imps continued flying about. The distracted demi-humans were taken down in droves, and Ludmilla frowned at the result. That definitely was not my intention. Opponents must be afflicted with the shaken status from a Death Knight before its skill will work on them, Nonna reminded her. Did that mean that fiends were immune to fear? She didn't think that they were, maybe they just didn't care, they were fiends summoned by some great evil, after all. Using volleys would be an efficient measure, on your part. Volleys? Ludmilla asked. Area attacks with archery, the Elder Lich answered. You are a ranger, yes? I am a ranger. Ludmilla frowned in confusion, but how does a single person deliver a volley? Nonna offered no response, leaving her to puzzle over her nonsensical statement. Certainly, she had heard tales describing great heroes who could do exactly that, But they were fantastic embellishments with no real details and no basis in fact. Rather than tie herself in a knot over something she couldn't do anyways, she refocused on the task at hand. Summoned imps were occasionally used in adventurer training. She had seen and fought her fair share of them when she found herself stuck at silver rank. They were fiends whose survivability hinged on their weak damage reduction and agility. Being able to overcome both made them easy marks. They were resistant to poison and fire and had invisibility as a spell-like ability. Offensively, they made slashing attacks with their claws and possessed a stinger laced with venom that hampered coordination if successfully applied. They were a terror against weak opponents but were an insignificant threat against her forces. The problem was that there were a lot of them, and she wanted to reserve her Elder Lich's mana for the adversary that had presumably driven these demi-humans before it. She issued instructions to her Elder Lich commanders. Follow those imps to the next camp and start destroying them. Keep your mana near full, use your ground forces to get rid of the ones they can reach. She brought in her bone vultures as well, ordering them to make an attempt at herding the imps towards the ground. Skeletal undead were resistant to slashing attacks and the imp stingers would do nothing at all to them. It wasn't an instant solution, but destroying a few hundred imps a minute between all of her forces would thin them out before too long. A few minutes after they started their attack, the imps started to show aggression towards her troops. They started to attack her directly as well. Fighting flying opponents on the shoulders of an Elder Lich was decidedly clumsy. She couldn't use the rune bow to its full effect, and she couldn't use her glaive at all. Fending off imps in melee set them wobbling precariously with every swing of her axe. "This is too awkward," she said after fighting off the first set of imps that came their way. "I will fight on the ground until we clear this mess up. Keep an eye out on our surroundings from above. Let me know if you notice any pressing changes." Nonna skimmed several meters over the ground, and Ludmilla hopped off of her shoulders with glaive in hand. She landed on a very confused-looking hobgoblin that was probably trying to figure out why someone was riding an Elder Lich around. The blade punched through the demi-human's armor with no tangible resistance as she fell upon it, and was withdrawn just as easily. She continued moving, sweeping her immediate surroundings clear of both imps and demi-humans before switching to the rune bow. On the ground, with the benefit of concealment, she could attack from range unimpeded and unharassed. Within 15 minutes, only Ludmilla and her undead forces remained standing in the encampment. She looked to the skies to see if any imps had attempted escape, but the trees surrounding the clearing mostly blocked the view. Nonna floated down beside her. "How did we do?" Ludmilla asked. "It was a trivial, though somewhat lengthy, task," Nonna answered. "No imps were noticed attempting to flee." She nodded at the report. They were lucky, or perhaps it was to be expected. Since they were summoned creatures, the imps would be arbitrarily attempting to fulfill whatever orders they were issued to the best of their ability. They would not act chaotically unless instructed to do so. "What about the rest of the camps? And the pass?" "Twilight has fallen," Nonna said. "It is difficult to discern past beyond the range of our dark vision." "We should keep going, then," Ludmilla said, then turned to the waiting Elder Lich commanders. "Reorder your formations. Keep an eye out for fiends and demi-humans in the trees. We still have no idea what is going on out here." Nonna took to the air, and Ludmilla clicked her tongue as she looked down at the ruined encampments that passed below. There was no sign of demi-humans or fiends, and she could only hope that none that might have gone their own way could get past her patrols along the border. Her attention did not stay on the camps for long. Movement could now be seen coming down from the pass. A throng of something was moving in their direction, and flying creatures could be seen overhead. Gouts of flame sometimes appeared over the ground, while the creatures overhead descended to scatter those below. As time passed and they drew closer, she got a clear look at the flying creatures. They were a mishmash of different things, and how they functioned made little sense to her. By their unnatural appearance, they were probably fiends. On the ground was a mixture of demi-humans, goblins and some others she had never seen before. They were being hurried by hellhounds and greater hellhounds, which she recognized from adventurer training. "There are demi-humans and fiends out there," she said, "fighting one another. Maybe we can just let them kill each other off?" They were both potential invaders. Sometimes the strategically naive or those who thought themselves clever would say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but those who defended the border knew that the enemy of one's enemy was simply the enemy's enemy. Their relationship to you was just what it was. One might come across a conflict between goblins, ogres, and trolls, but none of them were your friends. They were all just as likely to attack humans after they were done with one another. If one was particularly unlucky, one group would subjugate the rest and consolidate into a much stronger adversary. Having fiends subjugate demi-humans and then having them all turn against her was a decidedly unattractive prospect. The foreign policy of the Sorceress Kingdom has no clause for this type of scenario, Nonna said. Considering that they are all potential invaders, it is an efficient proposal, if the outcomes can be managed. We never received a comprehensive report from our reconnaissance, Ludmilla said, but the apparent strength of the individuals from those before us make it seem an even match. If these demi-humans were previously in a well-defended position, something must have convinced them to abandon it. The rationale spoke for itself. Ludmilla turned to address her commanders. Both demi-humans and fiends are coming down the trail. Reorder your formations across the way, line abreast, put a little bit of space between yourselves. We will let their fight play out until they reach our line. The demi-humans appear to be fleeing, so do not attack them unless you are attacked first. You are free to cut down the fiends as they approach. It sounded reasonable in her head initially, but she then realized it probably wasn't. The undead were universally feared and regarded as an enemy to all life. The chance of someone not reacting poorly to them outside of the Sorceress Kingdom was slim. Combatants would surely attack them in a bid to destroy what they perceived as a threat. Non-combatants would cower or continue to flee. Was this something that the army of the Sorceress Kingdom would have to deal with every time they went abroad? They were even having trouble leasing undead security forces to their allies. She didn't really have a head for how to improve their image. Perhaps her friends could figure something out one day. In the heat of battle, this was the most she could do. Before the fleeing demi-humans could make it any closer, a basso growl filled the air. The stones trembled as it rumbled against the bloody cliffs on either side of the pass and rolled down the trail. Ludmilla held her breath at the oppressive sound, and her skin prickled at the overwhelming sense of danger that it carried. Just as it settled to be replaced by the sounds of battle again, the ancient pass erupted into flame, throwing scores of demi-humans in every direction. Ludmilla could only stare as the scene cast its hellish glow over the valley leading down from the mountain. A roar swept down over the fleeing masses, as if announcing the doom of the world itself. At the crest of the pass, a massive fiend beyond her ability to reckon appeared, its form wreathed in flames that burned hotter and brighter than the inferno from which it had emerged. She could only bring to mind the words of the demi-humans who had fled before it, harbingers of the evil that had befallen the West. This was the bane of the Abelian wilderness. The evil star. What is that thing? I cannot distinguish its details from here, but one of the strange, flying fiends darted towards them, slashing at Ludmilla with its scythe-like arms. A shadow demon materialized in front of them and tore their attacker apart. Cast fly on me, Ludmilla shouted as its pieces disintegrated around them. The shadow demons can escort me. Go out and help clear all of these flying fiends. Fly. Ludmilla rose from Nonna's shoulders, and she tested drawing her bow in midair. It worked, though she couldn't figure out how exactly, and she tracked one of the scythe-armed fiends as it flew by not far away. She released a broadhead arrow, and her attack tore off half of a wing. It spiraled awkwardly to the ground where a death knight finished it off, and Ludmilla looked away to take an inventory of her surroundings. With the arrival of the powerful fiend at the top of the ancient pass, the demi-humans were overwhelmed. More fiends, the size of bulky, winged ogres, fell upon them with massive mauls, indiscriminately scattering their victims left and right. They registered to her senses to be about as strong as Nonna, and dozens of them had landed along the length of the trail. Did she have enough death knights to hold them? No. Beyond that, the best course would be to take the offensive and eliminate as many as possible while they were preoccupied. She was fast running out of demi-humans. They needed to act right away before the scaled fiends flew off again. Forward. The demi-humans do not matter, focus on those large fiends. The tread of metallic boots filled the air as the Death Knight line advanced. Demi-humans howled in despair, finding themselves caught between fiends and the undead. Some struck out against the Death Knights and were added to the growing number of squire zombies. Others broke entirely and fled, and fiends dropped down out of the sky to pounce upon their backs. Though Ludmilla's forces maintained their rough formation, it was still a mess. Each side was attacking everyone else. It took all of her focus to pay attention to her surroundings, fend off the occasional fiend and coordinate the efforts of the undead forces below. The ogre-sized fiends were stronger than anything her forces faced before, taking up each Death Knight's attention for an inordinate amount of time. One slashed the nearest fiend with its flamberge, drawing a wicked gash across its chest. The azure flames of the fiend's eyes blazed in fury, and it roared as it brought its colossal maul down in retaliation. The attack struck the Death Knight's raised shield, filling the air with the dull ring of metal. Despite the tremendous force of the blow, the Death Knight stood unmoved. Elsewhere, more of the black-scaled fiends drove into the Death Knight line, knocking aside squire zombies like twigs. Above, shadow demons and bone vultures roamed, pouncing on the fiends that flitted through the darkness. The Elder Liches had summoned wraiths to escort them as they fought their battle in the sky. Brilliant bolts of arcane energy and rays of blazing flame traced through the darkness between the undead casters and their targets as they ducked and weaved against a backdrop of stars. Ludmilla was fairly certain she had never heard of any battle like this before. She didn't think anyone would believe her if she told them about it, either. The Death Knights and Death Warriors, the Elder Liches, shadow demons and the Scaled Fiends, all were beings that existed at or beyond the realm of heroes, yet they were merely foot soldiers in this conflict. The army of the Sorceress Kingdom against the forces of the evil that was rising in the west. It was a battlefield where the strength of the average human was as insignificant as a dried leaf on the forest floor, a place where only legends would dare tread. Up the trail, more and more of the Scaled Fiends were making their way downhill. She couldn't lose her advantage. Death Warriors, flank the fiends engaged by the Death Knights, team up and work your way from enemy to enemy. Death Knights, continue your advance once you have been freed from combat. We have to keep these fiends' attention on us. Her line would fall into disorder with those commands, but she couldn't allow the fiends to leave. If they flew off, they could probably cross the border in under an hour. She doubted that the security forces at each village could stop such powerful aerial attackers before they inflicted considerable damage. Below, the Death Warriors were making short work of the Scaled Fiends that were tied up by the Death Knights. Limbs were removed in clean strokes, and each fiend could not stand against their assaults for long. She had a rough sense that they would be able to do well in an offensive role, but their relative vulnerability against opponents nearer to their level of strength made it a substantial risk to field them without first having the Death Knights engage. They charged from group to group, dispatching fiends as they went, and Ludmilla's forces steadily made their way up the pass. Nonna, she approached the Elder Lich during a lull in combat. What is the condition of our forces? This was something that was beginning to bother her. The Sorcerer King's servants all had some mysterious method of communication between one another at short ranges, but they were not very communicative with others. Unlike living beings, undead tended to not show the effects of accumulated damage unless it was in the form of a catastrophic injury, making it difficult to gauge how they were doing. Since she was commanding singularly powerful undead servitors, they each counted for a significant portion of her fielded combat strength. Not knowing how injured they were was a worrisome thing. Most of the Death Knights have taken some damage so far, Nonna told her. They are far from being in dire condition, however. Is there some way for me to tell at a glance? Ludmilla asked. Divine casters have abilities and spells that can do so, Nonna answered, as can arcane casters who have access to those same spells. As far as I know, items that do so have not been catalogued in this region. Then, do you or any of the commanders have this spell? Nonna raised a hand towards her. Life Essence. Mana Essence. You know, Ludmilla said, this would have been quite handy all this time. You never asked. Ludmilla studied the Elder Lich. Twin auras overlapped her figure, yet did not obscure her or each other at the same time, somehow. Her true sight decided to inform her that the auras didn't exist. How useful. She blinked several times as she adjusted to the new information being presented. The first thing she noted was that Nonna was slightly injured, though no visible sign of it showed on her form. Her wraiths were a bit tattered as well. The Elder Lich's mana pool was down to half. I should fight on the ground so you can regenerate mana again, Ludmilla said. Release the enchantment after I get down. She took one last glance from the air as she descended. The undead contingents had made their way halfway up the pass, approaching the tree line. At least she wouldn't have any problems with vegetation blocking her visibility. All of her Death Knights, and even the Death Warriors, somehow, had taken various degrees of damage. She wasn't even sure how the Death Warriors could have taken damage with their orders. Above, the scythe-armed fiends had been thinned out considerably. As far as she could see, roughly 3 dozen scaled fiends remained. At the crest of the pass, the evil star had its back turned to them. Something was drawing its attention, by the looks of it. Ludmilla silently urged her forces on, attempting to rotate them so that their condition remained relatively even compared to one another. Retrieving a broadhead arrow, she tried to help speed up the fight above. Though they weren't at great risk yet, her ground forces were slowly being worn down. She needed her Elder Liches free to regenerate mana and work to restore their fighting strength. Once again, she regretted the fact that she had neglected her archery. She had no ranged martial arts and none of the archery skills that other rangers near her adventurer rank possessed. Due to this, and the erratic speed and maneuvering of her targets, she was only landing 1 out of every 3 of her attacks. It felt like it was only through the sheer power of the runebow Ultra that she was able to accomplish anything at all. Over the next few minutes, the skies were cleared and she called her Elder Liches down so they could dispel their flight magic and regenerate mana. "Do any of you know what in the world these fiends are?" Ludmilla asked. "Scale demons," the Elder Liches answered in unison. Was she the only one that didn't know that? Maybe she was studying the wrong things. "Then what about that thing at the top of the pass?" She pointed up at the blazing fiend. "I can't even sense how strong it is. Is there any way we could at least chase it off?" "No," they answered in unison again. "We should send a message to Lady Shiltier, then," Ludmilla said. "The rest of you, return to supporting your formations. We will hold out for as long as we can. Those enchantments are fading as well, but contact Lady Shiltier first." The Elder Liches returned to their commands, and Ludmilla anxiously waited for Nonna to receive a response. 30 seconds later, she seemed to be finished with her message. "Were you able to reach her?" Ludmilla asked. "Yes." "What did she say? Is she on her way?" "Lady Shiltier is currently indisposed," Nonna told her. "She is in the middle of getting a facial." "A what?" "A fossy. I know what it is," Ludmilla snapped, "but why is it more important than this?" Nonna offered nothing in response, and Ludmilla repressed a sigh. "Then send a message to Rant." A blast of wind threw Ludmilla into the air, sending her tumbling down the trail. She rolled back up to her feet, bow raised. Nonna was nowhere to be seen. Up the slope a ways, her undead contingent was scattered about. The powerful fiend had landed before them without warning. Well, its deep voice rumbled over them. "It appears that there are still fools who would dare defy me in this cesspit they call a wilderness." Ludmilla issued a command to her forces, and the undead scrambled to their feet. Death Knights and Death Warriors brandished their blades, roaring as they charged. With a seemingly casual flap of its blazing wings, the fiend blasted them away. Further back, Ludmilla was thrown once again into the air and into a set of bushes near the trail. Before she could even finish rising back up to her feet, heavy steps sounded nearby. She looked up to find the fiend before her. Though roughly humanoid in form, it stood more than twice her height. Flames licked out from the glowing cracks in its massive obsidian musculature, and the stones at its feet turned molten red. Its blazing eyes peered down at Ludmilla from beneath the ridges of four horns that swept out past its temples. "And what do we have here?" it boomed. "You are a bit mismatched for your company, are you not, mortal?" Ludmilla glanced around. None of her undead could be seen in the vicinity. She hopped back to make some distance between them, reaching for an arrow. The fiend snorted. "Does your puny mind even comprehend the situation you are in, pitiful wretch? You are not even fit to lick the boots of those that I just cast away with a mere flick of my wings. You have no chance, mortal, no hope. Weep tears of despair at the coming of your doom." The fiend loomed nearer, leaning forward to reach towards her with a wickedly clawed hand. Their surroundings were cast in a hellish glow, distorted through shimmering waves of heat. Ludmilla didn't want to know what would happen if it got too close. She leapt back again, steadying her arm and releasing an arrow. Trepidation would gain her nothing here, she could only fight. There was a short distance between them, and the power of the rune bow launched the arrow at incredible speeds, but her attack was still somehow snatched out of the air with a twist of its wrist. Raising the arrow to its face, the fiend peered at it curiously. The volatile liquid within exploded, releasing a blast that echoed off of the mountaintops. 2 frost arrows struck it in the torso as the fiend flinched away from the blast. An arm swept out to deflect her 4th arrow, but it shattered from the impact and covered its skin in freezing elemental solution. Grr! The fiend cried out, What is this? What are you doing to me? Ludmilla wasn't sure at first if it would do anything at all, and she didn't bother to stop and answer now that she knew. The fiend danced backwards, trying to dodge her stream of arrows. Those that would have missed, however, ruptured from the extreme heat that roiled over its form, spraying their contents over her adversary. Enough! Ludmilla was sent flying backwards again with another flap of its wings. What is that weapon? The demand rolled over her prone form. Tell me. You should let many people see it. She hadn't had the chance to do so, but she now commanded the attention of an audience of 1. Did this fiend count as a person? Well, if she was going to die anyways. It is the rune bow Ultra, she said as she rose to her feet and knocked another arrow. Fashioned using the ancient art of runecraft. No. The fiend's roar was half a moan. No. You lie. Runecraft has been lost to the ages. You must have scrounged it up in some dusty dwarven tomb. It is no more than a coincidence that you possess such a mighty weapon. Ludmilla slowly shifted away as the fiend went on, but then it stopped and grinned at her. What's the matter, puny mortal? Its insidious tone drew its claws against her resolve. I'm right, aren't I? All I need to do is kill you and take that weapon. After that, nothing will stand in my... Its head jerked to the side as an arrow whizzed by its head and exploded. You're wrong, Ludmilla said. Weapons forged with runecraft are produced to this day in my nation. I have personally seen quite a number of them. After this, I am definitely going to go out and order a few. After this? The fiend's features twisted in derision. Has fear driven reason from your senses? You'll be dead. I might be, but not for long. I will probably be quite angry when I get up again, too. Actually, if this fiend killed her and ran off with her equipment, Lady Negredo would be able to divine its location. Then Lady Shiltir would obliterate it. After her facial. Ludmilla resumed loosing her arrows, and the fiend danced backwards again. Spare me the inconvenience and just die, please, she said. Madness. The fiend said as it continued to backpedal away from her assault. You dare ow. Damn you. You are no mere mortal. What manner of being are you? Ludmilla advanced grimly, and the fiend fell back before her. I am a noble of the Sorceress Kingdom, Ludmilla's voice echoed from the blood-stained cliffs above. By the will of His Majesty, Ainzul Gaun, you shall not pass.